Hi, everybody. This is Coach Lisa at Breathing Retraining Center, and today I want to talk about creating a breathing goal that inspires you. What's your breathing fitness goal? What's your why? Maybe you frequently can't catch your breath and want more control. Maybe you want to complete an athletic event without collapsing just past the finish line. Maybe you just want to feel comfortable reading a couple stories to a child on your lap without getting winded. If you're dogged by uncomfortable breathing that you recognize is exacerbated by chronic stress or low stamina, how can you measure and improve it? That's what we're going to cover today. A real challenge with assessing breathing fitness is that for newcomers, it can feel like there's no there. Although the quality of our breathing seriously impacts our vitality and our health, and most of us could stand to improve our breathing habits since our culture doesn't recognize or promote functional breathing, the experience is still vague enough to get short shrift. Breathing is invisible and intangible, even when it's uncomfortable. The average person takes 20,000 breaths a day, and it's managed by the reptilian part of our brains that puts repeated, primitive functions on autopilot. Breathing is not something we're meant to pay too much attention to. Nevertheless, if we want to improve our breathing, we need to measure it somehow. Here are several frameworks we can use to define functional breathing, see where we fall short, and set specific goals to improve and feel better. And please get checked out by a doctor first to make sure your symptoms aren't the sign of an illness that requires medical treatment on top of or instead of a fitness regimen. There are also contraindications for breathing retraining. A regular practice is imperative. So here are 4 ways to approach it. We can think about the symptoms we have that we would like to get rid of or reduce and measure those symptoms as we do breathing training. We can work to normalize our breathing pattern, and we'll talk about how to do that later. We'll talk about developing healthy breathing habits as individual initiatives, or achieving a fitness milestone, which is how a lot of people get into this. Okay, so firstly, list of symptoms that can arise from poor breathing habits. There is a list at breathingretrainingcenter.com/symptoms. These are basically the symptoms that arise as conditions of the nervous system in fight or flight. When we're upset, our bodies don't distinguish well between emergencies and chronic stress or worry. So, to our caveman nervous systems, an emergency initiates this Herculean physical response to fight, flee, or alertly stay still. But that survival mode of the sympathetic nervous system was designed to last only minutes, not the months it takes to find affordable housing in this day and age, get out of credit card debt, or many of the other modern travails we can find ourselves in. So, to get out of this state, we need to breathe gently and intentionally relax, even if that's counterintuitive, to thaw our nervous system back into the rest and digest parasympathetic mode that will switch on our ability to process food, eliminate waste, sleep, and think well again. So, check out this list of symptoms. What happens is when we're in fight or flight, all the blood goes to our muscles so that we can use our body to fight or flee or, be on alert, our brains. So what happens is that digestion, thinking rather than working from instinct, all the organs that kind of keep us digesting, I already said that, eliminating, growing, stop for 10 minutes or so. And what's the problem? The problem is when it lasts for months and then you can't sleep because your body is in that alert state. You're not digesting your food. You're not eliminating correctly. All these things that, are okay for 10 minutes in an emergency, but not as a long-term thing. So check out that page and see if there are any symptoms that you would like to eliminate. And maybe this is a portal for you to get into breathing training goals. Okay, next is a goal to normalize your breathing pattern, improve your breathing pattern. When doctors and scientists evaluate breathing health, they look at the pattern, typically over a minute's time, rather than focusing on individual breaths. It's possible to map out anyone's breathing pattern, including yours. The elements are on the screen. You've got normal breathing on the far left, and you see that it's pretty regular. The pattern is consistent. Then you see a period of breath holding, and then a deep sigh, which is a deeper breath than a normal breath. We talk about how this deep breath can be 2 or 3 times the size of a normal breath, and so a lot of people are hyperventilating, don't know it if they're taking enough sighs and coughs and other irregular blips in their pattern. Then you see hyperventilation, which is fast, large breaths, and then back to normal breathing. Tess Graham in Australia actually has mapped out what's normal breathing look like as a pattern, and then what's poor breathing look like. So this is normal breathing. Now keep in mind that all of our breathing, baseline, bench work ideas are taken, or we're assumed that we're at rest. We're not moving, we're sedentary, we're sitting around, because our need for oxygen changes at different activity levels. So at the baseline, we're not really having any activity. So all these statistics of what's normal are based on, I think it's probably a man of a certain weight, right? There's always a very specific control person, but it's general enough that we can all use it. So normal breathing is comfortable, regular, it's silent, you're not straining. It's nasal breathing, although keep in mind that you start wherever you are at. So we always want to progress one step at a time. So if you are 100% mouth breathing now, that doesn't mean you want to start 100% nasal breathing. I don't know if your system can handle it. So just keep in mind, this is the goal. Breathing into the diaphragm, breathing 8 to 12 breaths per minute, a tidal volume, that's how much air you're bringing in, would be 500 milliliters as an average, with a minute volume, that's how much air you'd be inhaling in a minute, of 4 to 6 liters. And Tess Graham, a breathing educator in Australia, wonderful physiotherapist. She wrote Relief from Anxiety and Panic, which is where these images come from. And she also has a wonderful book, Relief from Snoring and Sleep Apnea. Okay, so poor breathing is all over the map. It's by kind of definition irregular or unstable, and the person feels uncomfortable. You can hear that person breathing. So it's labored breathing, and it's typically mouth breathing into the upper chest and fast, with a higher volume of air in each breath than the regular breathing. And you can see it's like double the minute volume. Okay, so let me just go into who might pick a breathing goal for a pattern, and what would that goal be? Well, it's typically to normalize the breathing pattern. So you would be concerned about maybe how many breaths you're taking per minute, maybe a couple minutes, couple times a day, working with one of these audio tapes, inhale, exhale, doing it to a pattern. People who have irregular patterns, even somehow starting to get up every day at the same time, eat your meals at the same time. A lot of times people are just dysregulated in general. So actually improving any pattern can help improve this pattern. But certainly people who have chronic cough might work with this. People who are sighing a lot, people who are breath holding. A lot of people start recognizing that when they're checking email, or what else do I hear? Yeah, it is writing sometimes, but they'll notice that they're holding their breath. So for anybody who has breath holding issues, this can be something to start looking at the pattern overall. Okay, now there are also goals to develop healthier breathing habits. And healthy breathing habits focus on the 3 dimensions of breathing. There's biomechanical, and we'll get into the details, biochemical and psychological, psychophysiological aspects. So let's get into this. The biomechanical is just, our structure, how we, the organs that we're breathing in, if there's any obstruction. These are the types of issues that come up with the biomechanical aspects of breathing. So the healthy breathing habits in this area are breathe through the nose all the time, even when you're eating, speaking, or exercising. Don't do anything faster than you can do at breathing with your nose. 2, maintain an upright posture. Keep the airway vertical and open. Just like your plumbing pipes, if there's a crimp, it's not going to be as much flow or as easy flow, right? You want your pipes straight. Then breathe into the diaphragm, not the chest. Think of the breathing action as originating from the diaphragm muscle under the ribs, not the nose. That's what you might do, thinking about what's happening in the cycle from your diaphragm if your air isn't typically feeling like it's moving that deep. Next are the biochemical aspects of breathing. Breathing with a regular, predictable pattern, like we talked about in normalizing the breathing pattern. Steady size, similar size breaths for the most part. Again, we're assuming that you're not moving when we're talking about similar size breaths. Minimize disruption like sighing, yawning, coughing, throat clearing, or breath holding. Typically all of those followed by a big breath. Breathe like a healthy baby breathes, silently, gently, invisibly. Don't take strong gusts of air. Then breathe 8 to 12 breaths per minute. Typically, the fewer breaths we take, the more relaxed we are. So unless it's an emergency, slower light breathing is better than fast breathing. Then, I've alluded to this a couple times, match breathing to activity. When resting, breathe gently using all the principles listed above. During exercise, breathe heavier as needed. But then, when you go back down to your sedentary activity or you're taking your shower after your workout, cool down the breathing like you'd cool down your muscles to transition back to the rest state. Finally, the psychophysiological aspects of breathing. Sorry, there's a typo there. I see it should be 8 to 10. So you want breathing to happen without expending energy. Exhale completely but not forcibly. Practice inhaling and exhaling without controlling it. Then practice relaxation of muscles and thoughts, right? Tension requires more air. Stop negative thoughts. Think thoughts that engender positive feelings. Embrace instead of defend. A tight muscle is a working muscle, right? It's a contraction, and contractions require more air. So if we're tight, we're going to be breathing heavier. That's just the physical reality. Then, but lastly, increase your comfortable breath hold time intentionally after you've mastered all the other habits. Again, we want to be breathing efficiently, and we'll talk about this next when we talk about sports and athletic goals. But if you think about it just logically, the more you have to breathe, breathing is an interruption if you're doing it well. That's why actually people start mouth breathing and gasping. If I keep talking and I don't pay attention to my need for breathing, in a minute you can tell my voice is getting a little bit deeper. I'm going to need to gasp. Take a breath and then breathe again. And a lot of times this gasp, I mean, you can listen to any newscaster and you'll hear all these gasping noises. So basically, the more frequently we have to breathe, the more breathing is kind of an interruption. So think about how much more eloquently somebody can speak if they can get more out between breaths. Think of how much better it is to be eating and to be able to take a bite, chew, swallow without having to take a breath in the middle of that. So there's a lot of real practical reasons why the longer we can comfortably hold our breath is also some measurement of how often we have to breathe and how efficiently we're breathing. All right. Next, goals to achieve a fitness milestone, right? A lot of people only realize how uncomfortable their breathing is when they start going uphill or pushing themselves. So we can have goals to achieve a fitness milestone. Oh, I'm realizing I didn't talk about how to set goals for these healthy breathing habits. Basically, it's very, let me just go back for a minute. It's very easy to set one or even more goals in any of these domains. Breathing more with your nose, breathing less with your mouth, not mouth breathing when you're speaking or eating, not mouth breathing when you're exercising, uh, identifying correct posture and practicing that. That's just on this biomechanical. Then with the biochemical, again, 4 would be more of the normalizing the pattern work, but breathing more gently can be practiced. Again, just for a couple minutes at a time. This idea of breathing a certain number of breaths per minute. This isn't the most impactful way we can be practicing, but certainly you can breathe to an audio that's telling you when to inhale, when to exhale. That would be an activity. The whole idea of how to cool down your breathing can be an activity. So these healthy breathing habits are ripe for taking just one of them and improving that metric. As far as relaxation, harder to measure, but you can measure a lot of those symptoms that we talked about. The symptoms will improve when we move from the fight or flight to the rest and relax aspect of the nervous system. So relaxation really, almost in a linear way, improves that. And I've noticed I can actually feel when my nervous system switches over. I call it a relaxation rush. Okay, so now let's talk about these goals to achieve a fitness milestone. First of all, what is breathing fitness? Well, it's easy to breathe despite doing something physically demanding when we have breathing fitness. Just our breathing doesn't hold us back. We're not even thinking about it. Basically, as humans, when we're thinking about our breathing, something's wrong with it. And how can we measure breathing fitness? The beautiful thing, obviously, the medical profession has all sorts of very official ways of measuring breathing fitness. How we can do it in the sports realm is just taking some activity that's important to you and seeing if you can feel better as you do it more as you practice breathing training. So for swimmers, it might be how many strokes can you take before you have to take a breath. Can be how many jumping jacks can you do, or how many steps can you take? Nasal breathing before you have an impulse to open your mouth. Lots of things we can do with pulse. Typically, the heavier we're breathing, the higher our pulse is. So a pulse can be almost a stand-in for our breathing health. And we can have, like once after we finish our workout, we want to get our pulse back down to our resting rate. How long does that take? When we get to the top of the mountain, if we're hiking up a mountain or riding a bike up a mountain, what's our pulse at the top? If it's lower over time, that's a sign of fitness. VO2 max, maximum oxygen uptake, is a complete measurement of breathing health. Our breath hold time, and all sorts of ways we can time our workout and see if we can do it faster without any breathing discomfort. Okay, so now let's look at the Biochemical table of health zones. This is another way we can measure. In fact, it's the original way to measure our breathing health. Dr. Konstantin Buteyko in the mid 1900s talked about, he defined the disease state of breathing by the numbers, what's normal breathing, and then what's super healthy. So according to him, normal breathing was being able to hold your breath for 60 seconds, whoops, and your pulse would be 60. You would have a breathing frequency per minute of 8, and there would be a certain level of a percentage of carbon dioxide in your lungs. And he basically took people's fitness statistics and then took a blood sample, and basically all this was statistically verified at his time. And then he knew how long that person could hold their breath. And anyway, so people can have goals based on this chart, improving some number here, getting from normal to super healthy, getting from diseased to normal. This is very traditional. And this is how you do it. This is how you take your comfort pause. We work on this a lot. Lastly, when people have fitness goals, you can practice simulated high altitude training. We did this kind of in a de facto way when everybody was wearing masks during the pandemic. If we wear a mask, that makes our breathing more difficult. So when we get used to it and it becomes easier, we have improved our breathing stamina. And it's the same with progressive breath holding, right? It's just another way where we're making it harder to breathe. We're not breathing as much air, but we're covering the same amount of ground, and that becomes easier. Breathing more gently than normal while moving. Many different ways we can analyze this, but what we're basically doing is covering the same ground, maybe even faster, as we breathe less air as a training regimen. So again, just to summarize, there are many different ways to define a breathing goal in a measurable way so that you can improve your breathing and know it. You can pick a symptom that really bothers you and see if after doing breathing activities that symptom improves. You can take steps to normalize your breathing pattern. You can take steps to improve your healthy breathing habits, or work on your breathing as you achieve a fitness milestone. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.